Ladies and gentlemen, it's the world's #1 sports and recreation podcast, Cheap Heat. I'm your forever 24/7 champion, Peter Rosenberg. Make sure you hit subscribe right there for Rosenberg Wrestling, all of the interviews. And if you're not subscribed to the Cheap Heat podcast, go subscribe right now wherever you find podcasts. We have a great time every week. You can also check out our Patreon, all the fun stuff we do there, patreon.com/staymage. This week, as we get you ready for Money in the Bank, I sat down with one of the key players in all of WWE right now, and he may just win Money in the Bank, our guy, Chad Gable.
This is fun, guys, because his name has been coming up so much over the last few months here on the show. In fact, numerous people as important as me and others, have agreed that he is the MVP for that period between WrestleMania and now. That's right. He's a terrible guy, but a U.S. Olympian. Chad Gable for the first time on Cheap Heat. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What an intro, man. That very, very kind comments. I appreciate that.
Did you hear that from anyone else? Did anyone else express to you like that you have really been the guy here for a while?
Yes, I have. I've heard that from a lot of people. And it is humbling, first of all, but also, really gratifying because there's always a chip. I'm a guy that keeps a chip on my shoulder, I think, quite a bit. And the fact that I missed out on WrestleMania this year is something I really wanted and pushed hard for and advocated for myself for really hard. It means all that much more to know that I came out the other side, almost in a better place than I would have been. Who knows? And, it just seems like it's going this way and not stopping right now. So we're trying to take as big of advantage of it as we can, and I think it's going really well. We're happy.
That's awesome to hear and inspiring. So you just said you were advocating for yourself for WrestleMania. What did that look like? Are you really like you're trying to have conversations and just talk to people and say like, hey, what's going on? I should be here.
Yeah. So what it looks like for me, I mean, when I say advocating for yourself, I'm sure that looks different for everybody. But in my case, yes, giving stories, giving options, how I could integrate myself into what's currently going on. But beyond that, what's important to me is not just giving them options and saying, here's some ideas that I think you could do. It's giving them actual content to use, like doing the work myself, which some of the vignettes that came out that before Mania about me and Gunther, or me and the Intercontinental Championship and things like that. I made those. Like, me and a friend of mine made those ourselves. We shot them. We took the time to do it. And there was multiple ones, and they played them on TV. And so for me, I'm not a guy that's just going to ask and beg and be like, gimme, like, come up with something for me. When I say advocate for myself, I mean, I'm doing the work myself and then saying, guys, I've got this here, please. I think it's good. And if they feel that it's good enough and tells the right story for what we're trying to do, they'll use it. And they have, and they've shown that. So I think it's a credit to both the company and myself that they're willing to listen to talent's perspective and use some of their creative direction and stuff occasionally when it works. I think it's cool.
It has never been, it seems for you, like a straight line, as I'm guessing it's not for most people in their careers. I mean, most of us don't have like a line like that. Like, that's just, not generally how most people aren't Caitlin Clark, it's just like rocket ship to the moon. And even in the last couple of years, you've had the Alpha Academies rise and becoming like a really popular sort of comedy act, and you being sort of a comedy act for a while, with catchphrases and shirts. It's good. It's going one way, then it sort of feels like it's veering another way. Do you do a good job staying even? I mean, like, it's nice to talk to you right now in June 2024. You're upbeat. For people listening, he's sitting in his gym wearing his USA crew neck sweatshirt.
All is right in the world, right?
All is
At
right.
least right now.
So yeah, are you good at staying even at the times when it's not going that way, of which you've had several of those periods?
That's a great question. And to be honest, that's the thing that I've struggled with most in my life, since all of this and the ups and downs. in this business and in WWE, the ups and downs and the roller coaster is the thing I think you have to be able to grasp and get a handle on more than anything, because it happens to everybody, right? Everybody gets up here for a little bit, and not everybody takes the big dips back down like some people do. Some people kind of stay level and maybe a little one and back up. But for guys like me, and I've noticed, like, I mean, if you want to say the Shorty G period, where I would consider that one of my low periods, um, that was a rough one to get through. You know, it's a rough one to kind of bridge the gap and say, I can do this one too. I can make it through this one, because sometimes it doesn't seem like there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I've had to like depend on luckily I'm very close with my family. I have a wife and kids that, you know, can kind of level me out when those things happen and put things in perspective. I think that's the whole key to it all, is just perspective. It's like, at the end of the day, even at those low periods, you know, what I've had to train myself to believe, which is true, is that this is what I dreamed of doing since I was a little kid. Like, at the end of the day, even if I'm Shorty G, I'm Chad Gable, if I'm the valedictorian or if I'm the abusive father figure, whatever, like, I'm doing what I love to do, what I've wanted to do since I was 8 years old. And I'm still getting to go out there, hear a bell ring, and perform for people. This is what I always wanted to do. And I'm not going to say it's always easy, you know, to keep that perspective, but sometimes you just take a step back, and if you really force yourself to do it, it kind of helps level things out. But to answer your question, yeah, that has truly been like the most difficult thing to learn, you know, throughout this whole process. But I think I'm on the other side of it.
It feels like I just think it's one of the toughest parts of this business for everybody involved in it. And my wife sometimes says that she's been learning. She's like this whole business is like it's like a constant play, and all of you, like meaning everybody who wants to be a part of this show, whether it's someone like me holding a microphone or you doing the work in the ring, everyone wants to have a part, right? Everyone wants to be, and when you're not, you're like going crazy. Like everyone's kind of going crazy, and that's why whenever we talk about sort of the backstage politics and all the different things that exist, the tensions, so much of it really does amount to the fact that it's like a lifelong high school play of which everyone just wants to be on stage, you know?
It really is. And
And
it's
there's
funny
limited
how
parts.
perspectives change in that aspect too, to where when there's been times where, you know, I'll show up and I don't have anything to do, whether it's not even Shorty G, and you're kind of sitting backstage. And at that point, you know, when you're speaking to the play aspect, you're like, just let me be the guy standing in the background. Just let me do anything. Let me be part of the show. And then your perspective shifts when you get to like different levels. And now I'm like, man, I just want to be like have best matches and tell my art and do my art in my matches and do my art in my promos and every night and give me multiple segments. But you got to realize, like, we've got a roster of like the most talented people on the planet. And it's never more apparent than when you're one of the guys like I was for a while, sitting backstage with nothing to do, with some of those other guys doing the same thing. And you're looking at him going, this guy is so talented. He's got charisma like through the roof. He's physically one of the greatest athletes in the world, can do things no one else can do, and he's just not doing anything tonight. So you got to keep that in mind too when you're doing it. But it's a fight just to like play your part to the best of your ability, whatever you're given that night in the play, whatever role you're given. And then when you get the chance, and in my case, like when you get these chances, like I'm getting right now, to be a more prominent role, like, man, you better deliver, because everybody talks about, man, if I can only get my chance, if I can only get my one chance. And I've been doing that for years, but now that I finally got it, I'm like, well, trust me, I ain't freaking wasting this one. Like, we're going to make this one count. So
What so far have you had? What moment so far in your career has felt like the biggest, you know, Eminem mom spaghetti looking in the mirror? Oh my God, let me get out there and get it. What have you had that moment yet? At least one that stands out?
I've had a few. I don't know if I've had the big one yet. I think the phase we're going through right now might be it, you know, where I feel like I've got a chance to grab the ring here and really like kind of run with it, as long as I continue to deliver. The first time I really remember having a bit of the good anxiety to where like this is a chance for me was New Year's of I think it was 2021 because it was right when like kind of COVID stuff was going on and we had a show in Detroit and there were some people missing the show, there were some injuries, and at last minute like everything was kind of falling apart. And me and Otis were there, kind of new fresh heels in the Alpha Academy. We had just kind of turned, and they wanted us to go out and open the show with a promo and kind of do my valedictorian 4.0 stuff for the first time. And I was like, man, I've never gotten this chance. I've never really gotten too much of a chance to speak like live on the mic, in front of the audience. And I'm like, Otis, I call him Doze, but Doze, let's go out and just knock this out of the park, man. And like, just say whatever feels right and just be arrogant and just be ourselves. And we did it. And I don't even remember like getting this, like any verbiage or anything. It was just kind of say what you feel, what's on your mind. Cause we were kind of playing that night with so many people missing and we didn't really, it was up in the air and it just hit. And like, it felt right. It felt really natural to go out and do that. And when we got back after that segment and that whole thing, I was like, man, this character, at least for that point in time, I was like, I can run with this for a while. And I think we're finally cooking with something that we can latch onto, we can tell stories with. And I think it worked because we went on a whole run there with Randy Orton and Riddle, RK Bro. That was like really, really fun. And I think entertaining. And that was kind of the initial one.
Doze is left over from Dozovich.
Mm-hmm. Correct. The Dozer.
So I used to have this thing. My thing about you guys used to be that I thought they were using you in this way when it was comedic, where you were like right on the verge, I thought, of being what it could be.
Sure.
But my hope at that time, and I think I said this to Otis at some point, but I don't think I ever mentioned it to you. I thought you guys were the Chris Farley and David Spade
Sure.
of WWE.
Sure.
Was it ever discussed literally in those terms? And did you ever think that? Oh, I remember the moment. I was at the bar with Otis, and he was telling me about sneaking food from the hotel, like the little crowd, how you caught him. He was walking from the lobby. He'd gotten like 2 or 3 like mac and cheeses, and he's walking, and you caught him in the lobby, and you're like, what are you doing? And at that moment, I'm like, wait a second, these guys are real life Farley and Spade.
Yeah.
Has it ever been discussed in that way? And did you guys ever think about it in that way?
We certainly have, to a great extent. We've talked about it a million times. We're both movie buffs, and so like we see the similarities there, like easily. And we try to use some of it without going too over the top when we were doing our stuff. It was never discussed internally, I don't think, as far as character stuff. But I mean, it was obvious, right? Like I think everybody saw it too. And I think I have a theory on like why I think it worked so well. It's just like that dynamic was clear, but I think what it did was allow us, well, he already kind of did, but allowed me character wise almost to get, I guess I would say, like my foot in the door with the WWE audience, because up until that point I had been this wrestler, right? I was just a wrestler for them and done all these tag team stuff, was essentially just a tag team specialist. That was a good wrestler, but we never really connected with him personality wise. So to finally get someone who, as most people probably know, is like actually my best friend in real life. And we have this like Farley and Spade dynamic that people have seen and they love, they can latch onto that. And I kind of sensed that when they started seeing us on the screen, when whether we were heels or baby faces, it was kind of like they saw, man, these guys, they play off each other well. Like they really do like each other, or maybe he annoys him a little bit, but he kind of puts up with them, and that's, trust me, that's exactly how it is in real life. He annoys me constantly and I put up with him, but I love him more than anything. But that, like I said, it kind of let me get my foot in the door, and was kind of with the WWE audience as we start to like empathize with this guy. We get him. We see some of ourselves in him. Now we can start to accept him as this another level, the next level up of a superstar that we can get with.
For you guys, was it friendship first And you were paired together, or the friendship started because you were paired together? I don't know the origin story.
Yeah, so it was certainly friendship first. He was an amateur wrestler as well. We met at the Olympic Training Center in 2010. So it goes a long way back. We both lived in Colorado Springs at the training center. We were both training for the London Olympics in 2012 at the same time at the training center. And we discovered our love for like pro wrestling back then together, us and a couple other guys there. And we would go to this one of the guys' rooms we called the man cave, just kept it freezing cold after every practice. We'd go in there and cover up, and on the big screen we'd just turn on wrestling and we'd watch it every day between practices, after practices, all the pay-per-views, everything. We just were obsessed, man. And so our love for it grew there, regrew there almost, because we had kind of like, Olympic training kind of takes your attention away for a bit, but we kind of rediscovered it. And, so it's been a long journey. I mean, that's 14, 15 years ago now. And we've been friends the whole time and just obsessed. He, actually, he wrestled my younger brother in amateur wrestling, and I coached against him before I even knew him, which is funny. I am a little bit older than Otis. So it goes even longer back than that. But yeah, man, we've been friends for the longest time. And just, as soon as I retired from Greco-Roman before he did. He kept wrestling for a while. I moved on to WWE. And then I think that kind of, he as soon as he saw me get to NXT and that it was possible, he was kind of like, oh, screw this the amateur wrestling. I want to get to where Chaz is. And like, he's texting me and being like, what should I do? How can I get a tryout and all this stuff? So kind of giving him advice and coaching him along the way. And it's been that way ever since.
So who came up with Chad Gable?
So, they will ask you for a list, at least at the time. I don't know how they do it now, but in NXT, a list of names, suggestions, or what you might want to be called. And I must have given them 50 names, man, like a list of just like rotten, terrible names, like the ones, thank God, like they didn't choose any of mine. And it's like, they didn't even read the list. It's like they just said, what about Gable? Because Dan Gable is essentially the most famous amateur wrestler in American history. There's like legendary stories about him training to beat the Russians and all this stuff. All that to say, I mean, as soon as I heard it, I was like, yeah, for sure. So thank God we have some people that were more creative than me at the time, because I'd like to get that list back. Actually, that could be an interesting look for people to see. It was pretty gnarly.
Yeah, I always assumed, of course, it was a play on Dan Gable. Who I, of course, most famously heard of him probably for the first time, because I'm not an amateur wrestler buff, when Iron Sheik was going
Ranting.
crazy with Dan Maloney. And he goes, Dan Gable, all-time great.
Yeah. Well, he got this stamp of approval from Sheiky, so that's pretty good.
So, no, and then, of course, I went on to read about him, how the legend that he was. I assume Gable Steveson was named after Dan Gable.
Yes. And what's super cool about it is I had met Dan before that, but after I started with the company and took the name, I met him multiple times, and he's like total supporter of pro wrestling, which is the coolest thing in the world. Because if you go back even 10 years, but roughly in the 90s and early 2000s, there was kind of this like view of amateur wrestling towards pro wrestling that it's like, that stuff ain't for us. Like, that's negative. And Kurt Angle obviously did a big job in changing that perspective. But to me, it's so cool that someone like Dan from the true old school, he's so supportive. I've met him many times. He shows up to like independent events in Iowa all the time to like help out. In the Dan Gable Museum in Iowa, there's like a whole section dedicated to pro wrestling, which is super cool. And he like basically gave me his blessing to use his name. He held up when I used to do the Ready, Willing, and Gable stuff in NXT, and I had the towels. He sent me a video of him like holding up a Gable towel that he asked me to send him, and like did my catchphrase. And it's like, to have his blessing, not only for me to have his blessing to use the name, but like for a guy like that to put his stamp of approval on what we do, like, is a big step. And I always thought that was super cool.
Me too, because it's so easy to have people hate. It would be so logical, you'd think, to be like, oh no, don't confuse me with that stuff. I'm a real wrestler.
Yeah.
So was it hard for you at any point, like when Gable Steveson came to the company and was getting a lot of hype. Now, obviously,
Sure.
none of it had really been quite fulfilled yet, but certainly the way he was introduced. Let me just take you through what my mentality would be.
Sure. Please.
Speaking back to the same thing we were talking about earlier and struggling through the moments when you're not feeling it. Depending on, and I don't remember the timeline of exactly where you were at that time, but around the time when they started like welcoming him, and it's like when he showed up, I mean, this is a guy who's never done any sort of this version of wrestling ever. And they're like having him in the ring and adorning him and all of these things. It just was like, oh my God, Gable Steveson, he's the future. The conversation started beginning. They found their next Kurt Angle. If I'm you at that time, I'm like, yo, you Gable is here, guys. I'm sitting right here.
Right.
Now, obviously, he's an insane, I mean, he's a gold medalist.
Sure.
He's the man. He's I mean, you know much more about it than I do, but I imagine he's
Yeah.
one of the great American wrestlers of all time.
Hmm.
But still, was that hard for you? Was that like an extra bit of motivation or whatever you may have needed at that time?
That's a good question too. So I'll give you completely transparent perspective from me. At the time, I was doing this stuff with RK Bro. Me and Otis were tag team stuff, wrestling for the titles. We had a match at WrestleMania, my first WrestleMania match, when he was being introduced. My mind was on the fact that I had finally earned my spot on the show on WrestleMania. I was so proud of that. I was so happy about that and happy for Otis. And to be like, my mind was like, I'm wrestling on Mania with Randy Orton. Man, this is great. The fact they were bringing him in, and I was involved with him in his first kind of appearance, right? He came in the ring after that match, after I had lost, threw me around after I talked. But the reality was, I wasn't upset by any of that. Like, none of that bothered me. It was, I looked at it also from his perspective, and I was imagining myself in his shoes, almost thinking, like, I wouldn't want to be you right now because there's so much hype surrounding you and you haven't even started training yet. This is your debut. It's on WrestleMania, which you want. Everybody kind of wants that, but man, you better deliver, like, because this is their first look at you. I was pretty confident at that time in my character, in my performance. So I knew myself that like I was going to give them what they needed, what they wanted out of me. But there was no jealousy on my part because I'm like, you got a big job to do here, dude. You got big shoes to fill. I'll do my part to make you look as good as possible. But I was very comfortable at the time. There was no animosity. There was no, real jealousy. I went out of my way to try to work as well as I could with him as we went through everything, and welcome him and, offer whatever advice I could at the place I was at the time. So unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. Some guys, that's just how it is. You kind of got to get a taste of it to see if it's for you. It's certainly not for everybody.
Yeah, and it's certainly not amateur wrestling.
No, I mean, I always put it in a perspective. It's like amateur wrestlers are trained to do almost the complete opposite, of what we're supposed to do here in WWE. It's like stone face, like no emotion, like just go out there, do your job and get out. And it's like, man, if you did that in WWE, you probably won't have a job very long because like you got to show emotion, you got to show vulnerability. And it's not to say that he didn't have that, but sometimes guys just don't want to do that, or they're not willing to, or it's just not for them.
It's not natural to them.
It's not natural. And he's an athlete through and through. Like like you said, potentially one of the best heavyweights, maybe the best heavyweight this country has ever had. So he's going to be fine, whatever he chooses to do athletically, and he should take advantage of that while he can. And I think he is. And so he'll be great. It's just, like I said, the stuff is not for everybody.
Well, now
it's a whole different animal, man.
Well, now he's signed to the Buffalo Bills, which is another crazy. I mean, listen, I'll tell you one thing. No matter what happens with his professional athleticism, the man's going to have a hell of a book to write because now he's the first person to ever just get signed to a team without ever playing football.
That's insane. That speaks to the kind of athlete you are.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I can't imagine, man. Yeah.
So one other Olympian, obviously, who comes up more frequently when people talk about you. I've just always been fascinated by the Gable part of it and the wrestling thing, but is of course Kurt Angle.
Sure.
And so the question I had last week, I was sort of fantasy booking, as nerds like us tend to do. Like, wouldn't it
Sure.
be fun? No, my wife did. My wife said it. So my wife is sort of like. So my wife is like an Attitude Era fan who watches intermittently now because I'm watching for work, and she'll just pop in and like give a quick comment here or there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so her little comment, we were watching you, and you were having a dope moment of some sort, and she's
Yeah.
just like, she's like, I got to see him and Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
It was just very, very big. It was very simple.
Right.
And she was like, how cool would that be? And I was like, oh man, I wonder if there is a world, where during this moment where Chad is at his most terrible guy, obviously the whole world is waiting for Otis to just beat you within an inch of your life, right?
Right.
But wouldn't it be interesting if before we got to that, there
Yeah.
was a moment maybe where you thought it was going to happen, it didn't happen, you're running complete roughshod, and
Yeah.
then we hear Angle's music hit, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
would that be awesome? And then it got into a deeper conversation about, comparisons, and how naturally when we talk about you, you say, "Oh my God, we have the next Kurt Angle." Um, it's everything. I mean, it's really, you could be a good guy, you can be a bad guy, you can work in the ring, and you can talk. Like, you have a full character. Like, you can be very serious, but you also don't take yourself too seriously and will make a complete ass out of yourself. You guys have like all of these traits in common that are so unique. And I said, sometimes people get annoyed with being compared to someone. In the case of you, does the idea of you being, quote, the next Kurt Angle get annoying? Or is it like, hell no, I would love to be the next Kurt Angle. I'll take it.
First of all, to me, I mean, the highest compliment in the world. I mean, he could be considered, and is by some, to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, especially guy that crossed over, pro wrestler of all time. Athletically, character-wise, entertainment-wise, everything. He had it. And there's a hidden gem out there that a lot of people may not know about, but me and Kurt wrestled in 2018. We had a singles match in Chicago. It was kind of out of nowhere. He was doing his retirement run where he was pick and choosing his opponents, and he picked me one night in Chicago. So we got to have like a cool little 10-minute match on TV that ended up getting more time while we were out there than we expected. So for me, it was like the greatest joy in life, because I'm out there and we're just wrestling, man, just wrestling like on the fly, like just doing whatever we felt. And it's this guy that I met at Mall of America when I was, 12 or 13 or whatever, and signed my VHS of his VHS from WWF, And so for me, that was like a holy crap moment. And then to even at that time, when people were making the comparisons, it happened more and more as we went on. And the comparisons never bothered me, because if it was to someone else or someone I didn't see myself in, or at that someone that reached that level, it'd be different. But how could you be bothered? What a compliment. And it always has been. And they've kind of been steady all the way through, especially when I've started doing more of the comedic stuff that you mentioned and stuff, because he was great at that. And I think what Kurt kind of really showed me more than anybody is something you alluded to, which is once you're willing to be vulnerable and not take yourself so seriously, then doors start opening, man. And I think I was blessed in the fact that I don't really feel like I have anything to prove, physically or in that capacity to anyone. I've never really felt like big macho guy, probably because of all the amateur wrestling and stuff in the past. I've been through it. I've done it. So like, I got nothing to prove. I'm willing to look like an idiot once in a while if I need to. I think it's funny. And so that was really great lesson from him. And then on top of that, now that we're kind of getting to the point where I'm a little more serious and kind of an asshole, like one of the most highest compliments I've ever been paid, maybe the highest compliment, happened a few weeks ago, and it came from Randy Orton. Whether or not he wants me to say this, I don't know, but he found me back in the locker room after one of my matches and said, you made it, man. He's like, there's no more next Kurt Angle. That stuff's done. You're not next Kurt Angle. You're you. You found it. You found who you are, and you're showing everybody now. And to me, I was like taken aback, like to come from a guy like Randy who's done it all and gets the highest praise from everybody, that meant the world to me. So that stuff never bothered me for them to compare me to him. But the fact that Randy said that's done, there is no more, you're not the next Kurt Angle anymore, you're you. To me, that's an even next level compliment, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
think both of those make perfect sense, and it's great to hear. Yeah, I imagine being compared to someone of that greatness is not a bad thing, but you never know. Everyone is sort of different. Um, what was it like when you found out that he wanted to have a match with you that night?
That was awesome. So I found out about 2 nights before that, I think, and they said that's when I was with Bobby Roode at the time, and I was wearing the trunks, the regular trunks and the robe, and I got a text that said, "Do you have any of your old, USA singlets or something?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Well, Kurt wants to wrestle you Monday," and so I like went up in my attic right up here and I'm throwing all my boxes and dusting all my old singlets out and I had to wash it quick, and I got out the coolest one that I thought I had, and I was like, so all I could think about, for 2 days, and it was so cool, and Kurt was super generous, and what an honor, because like he only had I think 5 or 6 matches, leading up to his final one at WrestleMania that year, so to be chosen as one of them, just again speaks to the way he saw me and viewed me. And even since then, like we've stayed in touch. We've done a bunch of other segments together and like some entertainment stuff. He's sprayed us with the milk truck and all that. But he'll find me backstage all the time when he's around and just pay me the highest compliments. And he doesn't have to do that. He could just come in and do his business and move on with his life. But he always takes the time to talk to me and talk about how I'm doing lately and tell me how much he's enjoying this or that aspect. And it's specific stuff, so it's not like he's not speaking in cliches where it's like, well, you could have said that to anybody and it could apply. It's like he's speaking to specific parts of what I'm doing in my current story. And I'm like, man, he's keeping an eye on me. And that's like the coolest thing in the world.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Who who do you work with right now? What colleagues slash friends do you have that, like, when you watch what they do, whether it's in ring or on the mic or just the way they carry themselves, who sort of amazes you in WWE?
Amazes me. Well, there's some guys that I think when you get a guy, Finn Balor, first of all, first of full discretion, he's one of my best friends. But the guy's so smooth and such a professional in every aspect of what he does. He's another guy that's gone through a lot of these ups and downs, and I think we share that, and we sometimes in the past have commiserated about it and discussed it. But he's been a great help in like showing me, keeping me perspective and grounded and stuff. But even just watching him do it is inspiring, because I mean, that guy's been doing this for so long all over the world, and to still be doing it at the level he is in WWE, everything he delivers, whether it's promo, whether it's in ring, his movements are so fluid. And when I just picture a professional, like he's one of the guys I go to. A guy that doesn't get enough credit just for like some of the in ring stuff he does, I think, is JD McDonough too. I mean, he's got a knack for just making everything look incredible, and I'll find myself watching his matches just to see the way he makes certain things look so awesome, and I always compliment him afterwards. On the women's side, like Chelsea Green, and I've told her this too, and Maxine and her are good friends. I tell Maxine all the time. She's like, she blows my mind with her character work. She's someone who she knows exactly what her role is and delivers to a degree that she shouldn't be able to, on a nightly basis. It's like takes something that shouldn't be that good and makes it just incredible. And if you're able to do that with a character, and it's just not like she's having these 10 or 12-minute TV matches or even 8, a lot of times they're super short segments, but I think it's the sign of a professional when you get somebody that gets very little TV time and just maximizes it to the ultimate degree, and she's doing that. So
That's such a
yeah,
great point.
yeah,
Since she's come back, she really, it hasn't been done by getting tons of time, but
sure,
she's so impactful.
yeah.
There's so much care there. That's a really really good point. Yeah, and shout out to Finn, who's had an unbelievable run. And if you believe what you read, is now reaping the benefits of that,
Yeah,
and well deserved.
sure.
What is the ultimate? Obviously, everyone wants to win a world championship. Everyone wants all of those things. Those will all be great. You've been in this business for a long time now. You're just hitting your stride, but you're
Yeah,
also not a child. You're a grown ass
right,
man with a wife
right.
and kids.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
you're pushing 40.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
40G.
yeah,
Brad.
yeah. 40G. My next
Your
character.
next character. That'll be a sign things did not go well
Yeah,
after this interview. But
yeah.
um, but besides like the titles and things like that, is there anything like specific that you'd really like to do before it's all said and done?
Yes, I think I've done some reflection. As I said, I told guys when I was in Glasgow that I resigned, my contract. So I've also done some reflecting about what that means for me, not just professionally or financially or whatever going forward, but what I want it to mean to me. And I think, as you said, I'm getting older. This business is interesting, like if you would have told me when I was in high school or whatever, when I really wanted to do this, that, I'd be hitting my peak, when I was 38 years old, I'd have said, you're crazy. I couldn't even, how do you wrestle that long? But here we are. So I think when I've kind of evaluated what I want my legacy to be, or part of my legacy anyway to be going forward, is I want to step into more of a leadership role going forward, both locker room wise, and just to the guys, like we've got a lot of young talent coming up, guys from NXT, and we got guys like the Creeds who are just these incredible athletes. Everybody's seen their athleticism, but they don't necessarily have, like, they haven't got the guiding light for them to show them like the other stuff, the other aspect of it. No one needs to teach them how to be strong and athletic anymore. They've got that. I couldn't even teach them that. But I think I am the type of guy that would be good in a leadership role. And I think I would have a lot of value, especially to the people that, WWE and NXT seem to be really interested in lately, which is a lot of people with sporting backgrounds and making that jump from amateur athletics and with the NIL deals and all that stuff. So I think there's a big chance for me there to be step into a nice leadership role and offer some insight to those guys, whatever I can.
By the way, congratulations on the timing of your contract. I
Yeah,
mean,
thank you.
how long was your previous contract?
5 years. I signed right in 2018,
You signed in 2018.
2019. Sorry.
2019. So you had,
Yeah.
like I said, because of the ups and downs of your career, depending on
Yeah.
when your contract had been up,
Sure.
you never know what life is going to bring you. And this happened. Your deal happened to be up when, let's be real, you're absolutely the hottest you've ever been. It's amazing.
It's the timing is unbelievable. Like I've reflected on it so much. It's just unbelievable. But sometimes, I mean, these are the kind of things I think when they happen like this that you make you question, like, man, there's something to this. Like someone was looking out for me, or fate, or something, because the stars just aligned, right? It was just too perfect. And I'm just so happy it is, because it's a great, like, this is where I want to be. I'm like a loyal guy, right? So if I start somewhere, I want to finish there. If I start something, anything, I want to finish it. And I just so happy and fortunate that the idea of finishing it now looks different than it would have, a few years ago, which would have been just like, fulfilling my contract would have been finishing it, because I wasn't really doing anything. Now finishing it means accomplishing things, winning championships, and leaving a real legacy, and to me, that's the most important thing. And just, yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest upside, or what led to this the most, was just whatever it was, my wife, my family, everybody being able to talk me through everything, my ability to stick it out through just the lowest of lows. Because I was never gonna walk away. I never thought about, you hear guys asking for their release and things like that. I'm not one of those guys, but to be able to have to just keep your eye on the end of the tunnel and see everything through really got me to that point. So now, I guess, like you said, you reap the benefits of getting through that stuff.
And when you signed in 2019, there barely was another wrestling place that existed. Now there is. So, and we all know, and one of the things I talk about on this podcast is, no matter, I don't really believe in tribalism for fans. I believe in loyalty for people who work, but tribalism for fans, I find whatever. But one thing we can all agree on, multiple options is great for talent. So you end up in this great situation where not only are you hot, but they don't want you to show up somewhere else.
Right.
You would have been smoking hot showing up somewhere else. So like it puts you in the perfect position where you just got to do your job, and you knew, I'm sure it wasn't that tough a negotiation where people are like, we want you to stay.
Right. And it is, what you said is great. Like, it's great for everybody to have options, and everybody would just like quickly jump to the conclusion that, like, you know, if I were not to resign, I'd be going somewhere else. But the reality is, like, the master's degree thing was real. Like, I actually have the degrees, and I have other interests in motion graphics and like filmmaking, all these things. Production is very interesting to me and a passion of mine. And I always thought it like the kind of a cool idea too, is like, not cool idea like you come up with it, but just like a cool aspect that some people tend to do is, like, when their contracts come up or when they're done wrestling, they just kind of disappear and like ride off into the sunset. It's not some big fanfare, and that was kind of always the way I saw myself too. So who knows? I don't know what I would have done. Like, I may have tried to go to Hollywood and start making films, you know, like take the net and like move on, or title sequences or something, that sit at a desk all day and stop beating myself up. But so I don't know where my head was at. I was kind of open to everything, you know, for a while there as I was considering it. But yeah, I always kind of liked this idea of, like, once you're done, you just kind of drift off and people have say goodbye, and that's it. You're done.
That would put you among the very rare.
Never be seen again. That's kind of how I like it. Yeah.
I mean, every once in a while there are people who don't really show up very often. But yeah, listen, that's not for a very long time. Last one I have for you. So the big guys, the prototypical wrestler types, I like asking them what they say when people recognize them without recognizing them, meaning like you're on a plane and you sit next to someone and they see Randy Orton and they just go, well, what are you? You know,
Yeah.
but they don't know. Do you have conversations like that? Like, you're a jacked up dude, but because you're not tall, does it
Yeah.
allow you, if you're not around wrestling fans, to sort of just kind of blend in?
So mine are different than I think the ones you referenced for Randy's, and I'm starting to figure out why. I think so, because Otis kind of made this apparent to me, and my wife tells me as well. Is like, when I'm in public, I, for whatever reason, I don't know. I think I have a tendency to make myself look very unapproachable, like in a almost, I don't know, like in a rude way, like, but at the same time let people go, something about him, but I shouldn't say anything. So I don't know, there's a weird dynamic there to where when the people do come up to me and they say, they'll give me like the you, and they're trying to put their finger on it, and then what I'll get most often is, what's your name, or what do you do? And it's like,
I
if
hate
you
the
don't
worst one. It's the
know,
worst one. Because like,
if you don't know, why do you want to know?
I would never, because by the way, being a radio guy, I get
Yeah,
it. It's a very similar thing. I
yeah,
Are you, or the worst part, here's my favorite. I don't know if you ever get this. I'm a big fan, but then
yeah.
they don't even remember what you do.
Yeah. I'm a big fan. What do you do? What's your name? How big of a fan are you, brother? And then, and I think something else that gives me away is my ears. So for those that don't know,
Oh
I have some
yeah.
ugly cauliflower ear. So that is always kind of a giveaway. They know you either fought or wrestled, and a lot of times I'll get the like, "Are you in UFC?" or something like that, and then I'll say no, and then it'll carry on to then get to eventually what we just talked about. Well, what do you do? What's your name? Oh, can I get a picture? Well, you don't know who I am. Why
Why
would
do
you
want
like a
picture? Now,
picture?
once you say a pro wrestler, do
Yeah.
they ever then follow up with like like Hulk Hogan?
Yes, all the time. All the time. And then I always get the wrestling. Yeah, I used to watch that. I
And
haven't
then who do
watched
they
that
name?
since
Who do they?
whoever.
And then they
You
just
get Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, all the guys from the 80s, and then 80s and 90s. And then you might get the ones that watched in the early 2000s or something like that.
yeah.
But
Oh, Mick
it's
Foley
just
or The Rock.
yeah.
When did the cauliflower ears happen for you?
I started getting them about sixth grade, I remember. And that's crazy because, like, you wear headgear in amateur wrestling, right, to protect your ears from getting it. And headgear is the reason I got it, like, because it would rub up against it. I was wearing it too loose or whatever. So many times it would just, someone would throw a headlock or someone and it would swipe down your ear. And then that's how I got it. And what a lot of guys will do now is they'll get it drained, with a syringe and pull the blood out, and then it'll shrink back down and go back to normal. I just never did that. And so for about a year there, when I was in 6th or 7th grade, it kept happening. And I'll tell you what, tooth pain is really bad. People have back pain, stuff is really bad. Cauliflower ear, when it's at its peak and the blood, and it's still soft and it hasn't hardened yet, it's the most miserable thing. Sleeping is impossible. So I was just begging for it to get hard, just like harden up, be done with it. I don't care if I have ugly ears for the rest of my life. I just needed to be done with it. There was days I was in school just keeled over. It was so miserable for a while.
Did it ever affect you as a teenager from just a physical appearance standpoint, or wasn't it a big deal to you?
No, I wore it as a badge of honor and not as any type of badass thing. It was just like I was proud of it.
I wrestle, this is what I do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Chad, thank you so much. I reached out to the powers that be and was like, I got to get this guy on now.
Yeah, man.
And then obviously had a bad couple of weeks, some strange stuff there with the Wyatt Six.
Yeah.
So it's so cool that you made time to have this chat.
Of course,
I think
man.
people really want to get to know you. So this was awesome.
I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me. Anytime.
The great Chad Gable.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.